Hello everyone, it's Matt, and I'm concerned. Is probably the best way to put it. And this isn't going to be Lego related, so it's going to be nothing Lego related. So if you're not interested, there's other stuff. But the situation regarding Railroads Online is getting concerning. And I think it's fair that, that as a community, there needs to be some sort of responsibility and answers to what's actually happening. Now, the current attitude, or the current sort of, if you like, public face of the group developing Railroads Online, or QMA, and senior developers and that sort of stuff, seems to be that businesses carry on as normal. There's nothing to worry about. Development's going ahead as planned and blah blah blah. But the problem with that scenario is that we are seeing and or more or less reading about staff leaving the Discord because of things people have said. There have been chats that have been released which are supposed to have been private. There are videos and other screenshots and other stuff which has been released, which is very damaging to the QMA and some of the team behind Railroads Online. And generally speaking, it's, for lack of better words, very poor form. And if I was a person considering buying Railroads Online, and I was maybe on the fence and maybe sort of keeping it in the peripheral vision and watching what was happening, this sort of thing happened a couple of months ago, where we lost a lot of people. We lost Heis, who was the community manager, and we lost a few others. That was more on the basis that schools and colleges were starting back up. So obviously they came on board as things were winding down, sort of in the last academic year or before the summer break, and then they've had summer break. Other things have started turning, sort of winding back up to a normal speed. So some of them were just like, well, it's been nice, but I can't make it. And for all intents and purposes, that's perfectly fine. It's the way most of these, pretty much all of these roles have been done, as far as I'm aware, has been through volunteering. So the only person who's actually taken a salary from all the money that's come in from buying Railroads Online has just been QMA. So there's not been any paid community manager. There's not been any paid developers. There's not been any, from what information I would be aware of, there's not been any payments of any kind towards like a salary for anybody other than QMA, which as a one-man band is to be expected, but it's a bit sort of one of these things where if you're getting a community to be that big this early on in development, don't get me wrong, the game is playable. You can, transport materials, you can do this, you can do that. But, this is that, but, there are some bugs with it. The most famous of which has been the new C70 has developed a bug where it can derail on the 90-degree crossings. That is a pretty big bug if you're using the 90-degree crossing. So if you've got a 90-degree crossing, I'd have said 9 out of 10 times the C70 will derail. Sometimes it won't, sometimes it will. It depends on where you're going, which direction you're going in. It seems to be more if you're approaching it with the cowcatcher leading. If you're going tender first, it doesn't seem to be affected, or at least from what testing we've done on Black Sky Rail, when we were testing it the one night many weeks ago, just after they'd brought in just after QMA had updated the game with the hitbox sort of thing. The Tender first running didn't seem to be as affected, but Cowcatcher first was. And it's just, this sort of weird sort of thing. So, there's been that bug. And, it's just like there's a few of the hiccups and things like that. I mean, we've had the new assets. The new assets are okay. So the new freight cars, the new Heisler. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not. Although I'm a fan of vlogging locos, I'm not. If you told me what was which and which, aside from the fact that Climax has got the wheel on the side that the cylinders drive, I couldn't really tell you much of the difference. So yeah, it's we've had that, and really that's been the last major update. Now, with regards to news posts, because this is the big thing, and I started this off by saying there was a news post that they pretty much just said everything's continuing as normal. Let's load up Steam and get that up, because that's obviously a pretty big thing. So the community sort of read, official announcement of the development team. It also says, dear community, the Railroads Online Discord server will be temporarily closed. As mentioned in the previous statement, development of Railroads Online is secured and will continue as planned with the team. Kind regards to the entire Railroads Online development team. So it doesn't tell you what it's saying. It's continuing as normal. It's secured, which to my mind would say that either the funds that have come in from people buying the game is enough to continue development for the next 2 to year or two, so that QMA's got enough funds to cover that, or that there is investors on board which are investing money into developing the game. Now that might be because he said secured, that might be that QMA's development work on the things like the splines and some of the other stuff is then being fed back to the game engine proprietors, or people who normally own the engine, so that they can then use that as a basis to update systems on their side. Because if you've got somebody who's developed something like the splines to work with trains that might be useful for other things, it might be good that then gets fed back and sort of says, we're paying you so much to develop the system, or you're developing the system that we can then use or license for other people. We'll give you some money to help you offset the development costs. It might be something like that. It's not really been made public. The fact that it says secured is probably an indication that there is some form of proper investment other than just here's the Steam revenue and this is all that's being paid to a development. And obviously when when it said it's secured, and as per the previous statement, the previous statement was not a statement per se. It was actually just the official roadmap and the publication of that, and that was back in July. So effectively you've had a month and about a third towards a half. So in this 1.4 months, say, or about 5-6 weeks, there's not really a lot that's come out. And this has been really the second/third major thing that's either been community versus developer, or developer against developer, or developer versus community manager, or whatever it is, or staff v staff, and it's getting concerning, because obviously this is going to have a mental toll on whoever's volunteering. If people are on paid staff, it's obviously going to affect them. QMA has not been as maybe as public as we'd like, but things are probably progressing in the background that possibly us as consumers are not aware of. And realistically, and I've been having a chat with a couple of people on the Black Sky forum, or the Black Sky Discord, where we're normally playing rounds online, and we kind of see it as a couple of things. From what the videos that have come out have said, is that the Spline system is billed as being the thing to fix a lot of the problems in rounds online, but seems to be actually causing more, and the way it's coded necessarily isn't the best way it's been done. There's things in the video where there's like a U-turn in less than 2 meters, and the trains take it without any problem. Realistically, you'd want to at least code something in that sort of said, beyond this sort of radius, it's too tight for anything to take, and you need to derail the train. There doesn't seem to be any of that. There seems to be some issue with tracking what's where on the track. So there was that video where the loco sort of plummeted into the tail of its train that it had got in a loop, and it just didn't seem to do anything. It just went through. Yeah, give me a second. Been letting the cat out. And there's that thing where the loco heads into the train, and it's just doing loops without any problem whatsoever. And it's just like that loco's inside the caboose and inside the other cars. It shouldn't be doing that. And again, that's something else where they've stopped the loco, put it in reverse, and after a couple of loops, the tenders disappear, starts going away, and you've got all this other stuff, and it's a bit concerning about how that is happening. There doesn't seem to be any collision between. There is collision end to end, but if I then join up via another one, that doesn't seem to work. And now it's just like these are some pretty fundamental things that you'd want to work in a train system. It might be fine if you're doing something like something like a Railroad Tycoon-esque game where you're managing trains. Having the trains merge into each other is probably not a big concern. That sort of stuff happened in like SimCity 4. If you'd got a couple of trains, because they're not actually representing proper traffic flow, they're just representative. You could have a passenger train go in and a freight train would cross it, and graphically it'd look bad. In your mind, it would look bad, but to the game, it's just rendering that there's something there, and it's representative. It's not supposed to be a bona fide. Here's a passenger train, here's a freight train, and they're colliding with each other, or they're passing through each other. It's it's just representative, and something like that, where it's representative of trains going through each other or colliding with each other, in a game in Railroad Online where you're supposed to have physical locos and physical rolling stock, and they're not supposed to be colliding with each other like that, is very concerning, especially in what you'd hope, because this is the other thing as well. This Spline update is delaying progress on everything else in the game, because if you look at the roadmap, the next major thing is the Spline update, which is supposed to be fixing all the previous stuff, so the old track is out the window when we're just on the splines, and everything should work beyond that point. So you're basing everything off the Spline update, and once the Spline update is done, then you're adding all the other stuff like the signals, the telegraph poles, the weather, the animals, and that sort of stuff is all taking place after the Spline update. But if this is what we're waiting for, is the Spline update, and we've got all these technical problems, that to me is kind of indicating that the problems with the Spline are a bit more than what QMA was expecting. And Paul said this in a great way. A lot of the problems that QMA might have with the system, he never had to deal with in the old one, because the old one was a bit more robust and a bit more straightforward, and it effectively just went, oh, this loco's occupying this block, this loco's coming in, and oh, they've derailed. Pretty simple, because it was very physics intensive. This new Spline system is supposed to be a physics light, but at the same time, if it's not doing the collision between freight cars properly, if it's not doing the collision between the trains and the track properly, so that if you've got like that U-turn in less than 2 meters, when it should derail it, it's just bending the train to suit the track, and it's just going, oh, it's fine, there's no derailment and what have you. Just like, yeah, that's a pretty big problem. Why aren't you fixing it? And and that's a pretty big thing. But the other sort of, realistically, there's another couple of things after the Spline sort of hiccups, and that's really, they're kind of interlinked in that QMA doesn't seem to know how to manage the team properly, and I'm not sure whether it's QMA, but there doesn't seem to be, any proper control over the staff, and this is the sort of thing, and I sort of said, realistically, if you're going to have the Railroads Online Discord, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have that, realistically, you could do with having a paid job of either a community manager or some form of community engagement where they will actively monitor the Discord, will actively monitor the social media feeds, and will either drum up content or will manage the system that's currently in place. And then you can also leverage them to produce the videos which are about the game updates, which are about how things are progressing, which talk about some of the stuff that's coming down the line. Maybe you could then leverage them to do stuff outside of that quote-unquote community engagement role. So that might be things like research, it might be things like some artwork, it might be things like some modelling, it might be, sort of, this is what seems to be the latest reported issues. You've got this that derails on certain things, this works but isn't necessarily graphically right, you've got this text on this freight car, but maybe it's too pronounced, maybe it's not in the right position, maybe it doesn't match. We've done this screenshot and the artwork looks fine in that, but when users try and enter their own detail, maybe it clips into some of the physical model of the actual tank car or tender or whatever, and that needs to be changed. And to be fair, when we had the new rolling stock released, QMate spent the next couple of weeks, next 2, 3, 4 weeks, however long it was, actually fixing the bugs with that. So you had things like the tank car oil level wasn't being rendered properly. You had things like the text on the tank car not being rendered properly. The text on the C70, the front number board was just a very pixelated sort of rectangle. That's been fixed. So it's not necessarily that things aren't happening in the Railroads Online development, but it's, as I've go around, in this circle, in a way, things are obviously happening in development. We've had the new rolling stock, we've had the new loco, because obviously QMA has kicked out he's what I would call the quote-unquote development partner from back in the olden days, who was, blocking him from hiring anybody else or, leveraging the community to help develop the game and, progress it. So he's obviously getting that out. We've got the new lot in. They then had a little bit of a hesitation with the LGBTQ thing where members of the team were getting harassed because they didn't conform to the expected norms that some people held, which is, not acceptable in our society. They're a person helping develop the game. What they do in their own personal time, providing it's not illegal, should not concern you in the slightest. And to be honest, even if it is illegal, if you know that much about them, that is probably something because it's been caught out by law enforcement and law enforcement is dealing with it. So it's just like, leave them to do their job, and everything should be fine. And then obviously we've had the other issue of developer against developer. We've lost highs, we've then lost nicks, because the latest little shindiggy thing. So you just come around towards the end, and you have all this stuff, and you see this story unfold after month after month after month, and you see the lack of progress, or what would appear to be the lack of progress. It doesn't necessarily mean there isn't. It just doesn't appear that way, and the end result is just like you sort of have these questions: is the game actually going to finish development? Is QMA actually going to have a proper hand on the reins for the team he's got and the way the game is being developed? Are we going to see a more straightforward things on what the team is working on? Because at the moment it just seems to be, oh, we're working on the Spline update. Well, what sort of bit of the Spline update are you working on? Are you working on the fact that you're working on extra turnouts? Are you working on some of the collision data and working out why things aren't working properly? Are you working on getting models converted to work on the Spline update? You know, the Spline update is a very multifaceted, multi-layered thing, but there doesn't seem to be any straightforward, this has been worked on, this is complete, this needs to be worked on. There's none of that. And to be fair, it's not really any of our concern. We can't help in any way. You know, we're not developers on it. But at the same time, you almost had this like large amount of information in the past where we've had the signs, we've had the telegraph office, we've had the way cars, we've had people showing off like the short 4-wheel rolling stock, or the 2-axle rolling stock, some might call it. And you've had this model, you've had that model, you've had this loco, or progress on certain buildings, locos, or rolling stock that will eventually head into the game. But it's just like, well, there doesn't seem to be any clarification on some of that. Obviously, some of that is for way down in the future in other updates. So you've got like the telegraph office. Well, that's reliant on the spline being done, and all the other stuff. But it's just like, well, you've got all these assets. Would it not be worth, tying in some of this into the game as it is currently? Because if your big thing is the spline update, and it's the bottleneck for doing everything else, whether that's the weather, whether that's animals, whether it's a new building, whether it's additional trains or rolling stock, you're getting to a point you're just like, if the spline update is holding everything up, perhaps throw the community a bone with something, maybe the day-night cycle, maybe, I don't know, add birds to the trees that will fly away when you get too close. Maybe add a deer that's in the distance that then jumps between the trees and then disappears 5 meters from its original position once it's out of the player's normal view. Things like that, which would be things you do anyway, but then you're just releasing them ahead of time as it's it's something to show that you're actively developing the game. And while it's obviously in a lot of different circumstances, this isn't the first game where things aren't seen to be going as smooth as one might like. Space-based DF9 being the big example of that. And we've had other indie games, not as far as I know, which have had very, have either pulled out entirely or just been abandoned. And the big one everyone's really thinking of at the moment that is community funded, or would be seen to be largely community funded, is Star Citizen Squadron 42. Squadron 42 obviously being the single player version of Star Citizen. And I've not, although I'm a big backer of that, to the tune of thousands of dollars, I think it's less than 2,000 but more than 1,000, I can tell you that much. I've not actually actively checked recently. But it is one of them things where You know, I hope this isn't the end. But I've seen signs in this before, signs like this before, and it's not healthy signs. So that means I am concerned. And to be honest with you, I would imagine a lot of the community is concerned, and the lack of transparency regarding how the team is managed, whether there actually is any paid or any form of recompense for these volunteers, or quote unquote these volunteers, is a is food for thought, if nothing else. So anyway, that's enough waffle from me. It's been 24 minutes, and that's it. If I'm pretty sure anyone who's watching this video who is concerned about Rise Online has probably watched a lot of the stuff I've seen that's been released to the community, whether it's been official or not. Some people have probably joined Heisey's Discord server regarding Roads Online and seen some of the stuff there. Some people have been on the Roads Online Discord and seen what's the fallout, if you like, and the fact that the Discord server's now been nuked for the second time. So yeah, that's it from me. There's probably going to be other people who've posted Roads Online stuff, but I just thought I'd have a bit of a ramble. Get things off the chest, to use a phrase. So that's it from me.